Hey His Hands family, I'm Maya, and I'm going to be continuing my discussion with Ben on the Holy Spirit.
The Holy Spirit is the way the Bible speaks of the presence of God. So it's always personal, like Holy Spirit like has personality, and the Bible speaks sometimes about the Holy Spirit being grieved and this kind of thing. So sometimes we speak of the Holy Spirit as just like, oh, it's completely unknowable, so it's not personal. But yes, definitely a personal presence within us. I was trying to think of a helpful analogy, another thing that God gave me to really drill down on this. This is in the analogy kind of category.
Okay.
For like how big the Holy Spirit is. I asked God at one point, I was reading a book that said, it was trying to teach you how to ask God questions and have like a relationship with Him that way. And it said, ask Jesus what character in the Bible you remind Him of. And I was like, okay, because I've done questions in the past, and sometimes it takes a while, and I have to hear something. I go, oh, that's not really God, But when I asked this question, it was like immediately God said, Zaccheus. And I was like, really? Because Zaccheus, he's the short guy in Luke. He's like, he's trying to see Jesus. And I'm like, okay, I'm sort of short. Like God's making fun of me with that? But he's like, no, not that part of the story. And he's like, you need to go back and reread it. So it's a short story in Luke, and I reread it, and like the wireframe of that story is salvation. So Zaccheus is this short guy, like he doesn't feel competent to really know everything. He's hated in the town because he's chief tax collector in Jericho. And Jericho is this big city that you have to travel on your way to the temple. So it was a huge city, and everybody had to go through the temple, through the city on the way to the temple several times during the year. And he collected tax, so he was like the richest guy in town, but probably insecure, who knows. And so that leads him to become a tax collector. But he's fascinated by Jesus for whatever reason. And Jesus comes into town, and he wants to figure out Jesus. So he tries to get up in this tree and get a perspective. So he's like, he seems genuinely interested in Jesus, but he's trying to do it on his own terms, like up in the tree. And so Jesus comes down the street, and he looks up, and Jesus seeks him. Like he's seeking out Jesus, but then Jesus turns the tables, and he seeks out Zaccheus and says, you need to come down from the tree. Jesus says, I must stay at your house tonight. And that was a statement that Jesus was pointing me to. And he was like, that's kind of the nutshell of what salvation is. Like something just instantly changes in Zaccheus. He goes from the most hated tax collector who was selfish and robbing people and embezzling in his town, and something in like this Jesus that he's been listening to and probably taking these words to heart. Like when Jesus himself looks him in the eye and says, I have to be at home in you tonight. Like God says, I'm compelled to live in your house. And Zaccheus, he just melts. And instantly, and we assume like they actually went to his house. It doesn't give us a description of that in the story, but surely they actually went to his house and had a discussion and this kind of thing. Because in follow-up from that, Zaccheus says, any way that I've wronged anybody else, like I'm making that right instantly. And if I've defrauded somebody else, going to pay them back 2 times more, 4 times more. Like he goes beyond the law, and he's just immediately generous. So like what can change somebody so much overnight that they go from utter selfishness to being a guy on a mission? And it's interesting, like for some people, like Matthew, the tax collector, when he gets called, Jesus says, you need to drop everything and come be my disciple and follow. But Zaccheus, it's like Zaccheus is immediately on a mission, and he already knows everybody that's struggling in the town. He knows who's poor, probably because he was the one that was robbing them, And so he knows his mission, like he's transformed. So it's Christ in you, the hope of glory, is salvation in a nutshell.
I mean, that really does go full circle to your salvation, because it's like you have these sinful ways from before, but then you get to the point where you recognize that it's not getting you to where you think you should be. It's not fulfilling
Yes.
you in this way. I mean, I bet he had heartaches from just being in that position and being in that job and feeling like, I have all this stuff, but it's not giving me any value. And then seeking that out from like in a desperation, like that's what I feel like the tree climbing is for us. Like, I'm just going to go to church for this one time, or I'm going to listen to this podcast or this sermon. And you just hear that one word where it's just like, God's like, I want to enter, like you just said, like, I want to go inside your house. I'm going to give you value in front of everybody else and see that that's what it's worth. And it does, it gives you this over sense and feeling of like, I want to give this to somebody else. Like, I need to go tell them that, you are valuable, you are worthy, and you need to come and get, the salvation too. So. Yeah,
and Jesus literally says in that moment, because the crowd responds and says, like, Jesus, why would you go and be in the house of a notorious sinner? And Zaccheus is like, I can hear you. And Jesus says, today salvation has come to his house. And I think he's talking about himself. Like, Jesus, that's his name, salvation. I am salvation, and I'm coming to his house because he says Zaccheus is a true son of Israel. And so Zaccheus goes from someone who's been rejected by everybody in the town, maybe somewhat rightly because of his behavior. But completely out of grace, Jesus says, salvation has come to your house. You are my child. And that's what it is to be saved. So what we can't do is then just treat the Holy Spirit as just this extra little thing. It would be like, if Jesus came and literally lived in your house, everything would change. Like, you would just, like, Jesus, here's the checkbook. Here's, my normal routine. Like, I'm in this job, but if you want me to do anything else, like, I'll do it. We are filled with the Holy Spirit when we're saved. Like, we are given the Holy Spirit because the Holy Spirit is salvation. But that doesn't preclude us being continually filled with the Spirit. In fact, it should be like every day we want more of it.